Winter in Germany. Not exactly a barrel of laughs, but that's where you're wrong. As someone who's made a living making fun of the Germans, I've already discovered in my first programme, travelling in the north of the country, how in the 18th and 19th centuries, Germany had a golden age like we've never had. None of this is secret, it's just that we don't bother looking at it. I'm starting to think we ought to be interested, but we're not. This is my whistle-stop tour around Germany. I'm trying to get to understand the place better than I otherwise might. I've come to Germany to take another look at the place, to look beyond the classic British stereotypes of sausages, mullets and no sense of humour, and also to try and forget about the Second World War for once and find out more about German culture. And the 19th century was a powerhouse of art, music, literature. It's an incredible place, it's enormous. I've been here for 2 weeks now and I feel like I've only just scratched the surface. So, let's keep going. I've decided to start my journey in the south from somewhere a little different. I'm in the Sächsische Schweiz National Park, which is on the border with the Czech Republic. It's a really beautiful place and it's been an inspiration over the years to artists and writers, particularly painters, German painters. Caspar David Friedrich came here and was particularly inspired by the landscape, so we're going to try and find some of the places that he painted. Caspar David Friedrich is Germany's romantic painter par excellence. His paintings depict diminutive figures in vast landscapes, by night skies, morning mists, barren trees or Gothic ruins. For Friedrich, landscapes represent the divine. They're places for meditation and worship. It's incredibly beautiful here. You can see why an artist like Friedrich would be so inspired by the rock formations here. This is one of his famous paintings, Felsenschlucht, and I'm going to go and look for this particular, cluster of rocks, I think is the best way of describing it. This way, I think. Well, actually, it would be described more properly as one of the most famous rocky ravines in Swiss Saxony, a natural wonder which has inspired a wealth of artists. No. Found it. There we go. Yes, look. That's there's a bit missing off the top, but essentially that's it. That's the same. This must be roughly where he painted this as well. I found it. Mission accomplished. I'm going to have a closer look. If I don't slip over. I had no idea this existed in Germany. It's not just like the Alps, it's not just mountains, it's these incredible sort of fingers of rock. And this is the part of the park they let people visit. The idea is to leave the rest of it in its natural state. The slogan they have here is Natur sein lassen, which means let nature be natural, or something like that. So, and here we go. Crikey. We're all having to tread a bit gingerly because of the snow and the ice here. And because it's a really long way down. But this is breathtaking. Caspar David Friedrich settled in Dresden, a city further along the Elbe River. Dubbed the Florence of the North, it was one of Europe's most prestigious artistic and cultural centres. But for British people, Dresden has a different resonance. It conjures up something else. In this programme, I promised not to mention the war, but I'm somewhere where I can't really avoid the subject. I'm in Dresden. Now, Dresden, of course, is synonymous, along with Coventry, with the destruction caused by aerial bombing during the Second World War. 90% of this city centre was destroyed, so, to be honest, it's a surprise to find it returned to its 19th century glory. It really is quite incredible. It also makes you wonder what that means. Why have they done that? It feels like, in a way, in Dresden they've tried to reset the clock. So, Dresden is old, but not really old, like a toy town or theme park. It seems strange to us, but this is what Germany feels it needs to do. It has to claim back that artistic heritage lost during the war by building the old anew. In comparison, Coventry's hardly had the same 5-star restorative treatment. It was Caspar David Friedrich who originally drew me to Dresden, but I've inevitably been distracted by the war. However, I've come to Germany to look for something else, and I'm going to stick to that promise. Saxony is well known for its beautiful countryside, but it's also where we get most of our Christmas traditions from. Prince Albert, of course, as we all know, brought a Christmas tree with him from Germany and instituted the whole tradition of having lights in Christmas trees at Christmas in Britain. But it was an old German tradition that had been around for a long time. Especially giving gifts at Christmas within families is a Saxon tradition. The practice of decorating trees started in pagan times. During the winter solstice, evergreens were decorated by Germanic tribes. The evergreen was a tree of life because it was able to keep its hue despite the cold winter. In those times, children were not allowed to take part in the decoration ceremony. Instead, they were kept away in a separate room with their father. Meanwhile, mother decorated the tree. As usual, the British then hijacked this pagan tradition, and Christmas would be celebrated with a strange mutant recreation of the German pagan past forevermore. Toy making is a 300-year-old tradition in Saxony, and there are hundreds of families who still practice the craft of making wooden Christmas toys. All year long, master wood turners and artisans produce tens of thousands of folk art figures here, which include Santas, angels, and Christmas trees. Silver mining had made Saxony rich, but in the 1600s the ore began to run out, and the miners had to find a new way to earn a living. So they turned to traditional wood carving, making decorations for Christmas and toys. This trade continues to this day, and while most of the work's been industrialised and mass production methods are used, the really tricky bits still have to be done by hand. I'm going to try and paint an angel's wings now. Oh, that's terrible. Have I done such a bad job? She's laughing in my face. OK, so that won't be making its way under the Christmas tree. It was actually a German literary giant, Johann Wolfgang Goethe, who nudged the Christmas tree into the mainstream with his smash hit novel, The Suffering of Young Werther. He's the reason I wanted to sample a little of the ghost of German Christmas past. Goethe was based in Weimar, and Weimar is my next port of call. Luther, Liszt, Bach and Schiller were just some of the creative geniuses who contributed to Weimar's magic moment as Germany's intellectual focal point. Weimar was like a post-Waterloo Athens, dominated by gossip and cerebral activity. If there was one place to be seen in Weimar, it was at the Hotel Elephant. In all eras, the Elephant was known as a social and cultural meeting point, a place where poets, scholars, artists, statesmen and intellectuals came together. Keen to stay in vogue, I've decided to stay here too. This is the cellar at the Elephant Hotel. I'm sitting where Goethe used to sit. That's an original candle from the 18th century. It isn't, of course, but this place was a veritable who's who of German and European culture. They've all come here, they all stayed here. Goethe, Schiller, Bach, Clara Schumann, Mendelssohn, Liszt, Wagner, Tolstoy, Klee, Kandinsky, Walter Gropius came here, Thomas Mann, Günter Grass. And the barman just told us that Pink Floyd were here last year. All of them have in their time left their mark, done a sketch or left a quote, and I'm having a go now, because what they really need is an Al Murray on their wall. This is woeful. GB on his bum there. The library in Weimar, with its large concentration of history, art and European serious literature, is one of the most prestigious in Germany. Karl August was Goethe's patron, and he asked him to manage Weimar's library in 1797. Here Goethe found riches of his wildest dreams.
There's 80,000 volumes in this library, and Goethe was able to help himself to pretty much all the knowledge in the world. As a result, he became a true Enlightenment polymath.
The majority of Goethe's work, including the famous novel Faust, was produced in Weimar. Following an encounter with Renaissance architecture in Italy, Goethe replicated his experience by building an Italian microcosm in Weimar. Goethe lived in this Baroque mansion for 50 years with his companion Christine Vulpius and child August. It's exactly as he would have left it. Goethe's home was the venue for much of Weimar's intellectual activity, from lectures to literary circles to chamber music concerts and dramatic readings. This is Goethe's house, and in many ways the way this house is laid out it's like Goethe. It's in different compartments, because we know him as a literary figure, but he was actually a much broader man of knowledge, wasn't he? What other subjects was he interested in?
I think he's really an universal person. He loved natural science, every kind of natural science, geology, for example, morphology. He loved botanic studies and the color, the study of the theory of colors, for example. And he tried to combine everything in the world.
Because it's very Enlightenment, isn't it, to try and have a broad knowledge of the Enlightenment, to try and know everything that there is to know. You couldn't do that nowadays, though, could you? It's impossible.
Oh, too much knowledge today. And I think also he understood quite well that this time was over.
So in a way, he stands at the end of one movement, at the beginning of another. I wonder how he had time to do everything.
I don't know when he did that, but he was very diligent. He stood up very early in the morning. And of course, he had a big staff of people who took care for him.
If you had to sum up his philosophy, what would it be?
I think he said, one day he said, my life is like an example for everything. About Shakespeare, you know nearly nothing, but about Goethe, you know everything. Every bill is in the archives still. You can reconstruct every day in his life, nearly.
Goodness me. Well, thank you so much for talking about enlightening me about the Enlightenment man. Thank you. You can tell by the furniture how for Goethe, heritage was paramount. The building itself is a declaration of Goethe's ideals. Goethe's novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther, is a tale of unrequited love. The central character Werther writes letters telling of his unrequited passion for a woman. In many ways, this is sort of semi-autobiographical. Goethe went through something similar, but he didn't, as Werther did, commit suicide. The book was a smash all the way across Europe. There was a Werther craze. People used to dress like the lead character, and Napoleon said he used to carry a copy of it with him everywhere on his campaigns across Europe. After the publication of The Sorrows of Young Werther, Goethe became a celebrity overnight. Werther is the story of a mind being taken up by a fashionable obsession, German romanticism, or Sturm und Drang, storm and stress. Sturm und Drang literature explored freedom, nature, and the German mother tongue. That's Goethe's garden house behind me. He used to come here to write. He liked to be inspired by nature and wrote about characters who felt that way too. This was very much an Enlightenment way of looking at the world. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the great Enlightenment thinker, talked about the individual being at one with nature and getting back to the primitive human state of living in the natural world. Goethe never really ranked highly in my reading list, but being in and around the places he lived is giving me a real sense of the man, his life, and his huge contribution to German literature. Goethe's best friend was the playwright Friedrich Schiller, who moved to Weimar to be with him. His first play was a Robin Hood tale called The Robbers. Karl, the son of a count, is dispossessed through the plotting of his brother Franz, and turning his back on the social order he finds unjust and corrupt, he becomes the leader of a band of robbers. The play is a Rousseau-esque response to society's corruption, and its message is that true freedom lies in a return to nature. It's interesting that Schiller was speaking directly from experience. Schiller wrote The Robbers when he was 19, and it was an instant sensation, with its themes of tyranny and rebellion. It's very much an Enlightenment play, like the sort of plays being written in pre-revolutionary France at the time. But Schiller had personal experience of tyranny.